morning. Welcome to the May 20th, 2021 special meeting of the Glendale City Council, being called to order at 9:08 a.m. And of course, due to the evolving situation with COVID-19, novel coronavirus, and health recommendations from the LA County Health Department, the City of Glendale council meeting will be available to the public electronically. You can view the special meeting on local cable TV, channel 6, and AT&T UVerse, channel 99. It is also streaming online at glendaleca.gov at our public meeting portal. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during the Glendale City Council special meeting. And with that, Mr. Adjournment, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Agajanian.
Present.
Brotman.
Here.
Kasakian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
And Mayor Devine.
Here. And your report, please.
The agenda for the Thursday, May 20th, 2021 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on May 18th, 2021 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And next?
Next would be finance regarding fiscal year 2021-2022 budget study session number 7, fiscal year 2021-2022 citywide budget summary and follow-up items including Measure S and PBC charges.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian, our last session.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Mayor, members, City Council. As you aptly indicated, this is budget study session number 7. The last one we had initially shared with Council the initial budget, proposed budget, and then Measure S funding, and 4 sessions on departmental presentations. All 14 departments presented their budgets, and we received feedback and valuable input from Council. This would conclude the budget study sessions. We've done 4 more than we did last year, and we appreciate your indulgence and the feedback that you've provided. This morning, staff's going to cover primarily follow-up items on Measure S, as well as the GWP's PBC program, and then we'll delve into fiscal year 21-22 proposed citywide budget and open it up to questions and comments from Council. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Flynn, Director of Finance, who alongside the budget team have worked around the clock to put these presentations together and pull all the data needed to get us here. Michelle?
Great. Good morning, Mayor Devine, members of Council. I'm happy to be here this morning for our last study session and provide to you our citywide budget for this upcoming year, as well as some follow-up items, as Mr. Galanian mentioned. So primarily the follow-up items were surrounding Measure S. So I'm going to quickly cover these for you all. Some of the items that came up were the pedestrian safety and bike lane implementation plan. On the pedestrian safety improvements, we have location at Glendale Avenue from Doran Street to Broadway and Wilson Avenue, Central Avenue to Adams at an estimated cost of $500,000, as well as additional enhancements at various other intersections for another $500,000. On the bike lane installation, we're looking at an area on North Brand Boulevard from Glen Oaks to Mountain, and the estimated cost on that location is $300,000. So in total for this item, the pedestrian safety and bike lane implementation plan would be $1.3 million. The next item was capital improvements to mitigate the heat island effect. The cool reflective pavement estimated cost is $550,000. This includes 5 locations in the city that are planned for slurry seal, and so this is a good opportunity to utilize the cool reflective pavement in these areas. as well as ongoing repair and maintenance, which would be a future cost of another $50,000. And then some tree plantings throughout the city, 500 street trees and an additional 100 trees in our parks. And that cost is estimated at $250,000. So in total for this item is $800,000.
I'd like to add that the 100 park trees that we're proposing to plant at our parks are going to provide shade around the playground equipment primarily.
On slide 6, the next item was the street art project. For creative design crosswalks, the estimated cost is $25,000 per crosswalk, and at intersections, it can range anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 per location, depending on the size of that intersection. There are some other funding opportunities for this item. So the cost that is being requested from Measure S is $100,000, but there is some additional funding to make up the total cost of about $350,000. So there's some one-time Ciclavia funding that can be utilized, and that would help close the gap for that $350,000 in total.
And Michelle, if I may interject here and this is for staff and not necessarily for you, but on the creative design crosswalks, I just want to make sure that the Arts and Culture Commission is included in the decisions that are made because this is art that we're putting on our streets. I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Sure.
I would just say, Madam Mayor, that in as much as it is an artistic implementation, I agree with that. But in terms of a visual effect to deter drivers, I don't see the need for the Arts and Culture Commission to be directly involved. As you see the juxtaposition of the two photos in the slide, the one above perhaps would be appropriate for arts and culture, in my opinion, but not the lower one, which is intended to give the effect of a three-dimensional object in the middle of the road. And I would like to, quite honestly, see implementation of both types in the city.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Najarian.
Well, I don't want to make a deal about this, but I really worked hard at Metro. That Ciclavia money is Metro money, or is that the city's contribution to what we were going to supplement the Metro money with?
Mr. Lanza-Fame's walking to the podium to respond to that question. Council.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Councilman Najarian, that is the Ciclavia grant money. It is money that we cannot use for that type of event because of the COVID protocols. And so Metro had advised that we could use it for other pedestrian safety type programs like these painted sidewalks. And that's why we're offering it here. It doesn't need to be. It could be, we could put it to some other use, but we wanted to alert the council that there was funding if we wanted to through that Metro grant.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let me go back to my original point. I had to burn some political capital to get that money back to Glendale. This was Glendale's second bite at a Ciclavia. And it was my hope it could be used for a biking event. And it was, in fact, scheduled to be a biking event. Now I kind of feel like someone snatched the baby from my arms and given it to someone else. I think we should not spend that money so quickly and think about something that's bicycle related for the city. That money was originally intended for a bike event. I worked hard to get it for a bike event, and now it's going to crosswalks, which aren't directly related to biking. And I'd like to maybe just pause on that and, think about that for just a moment. I didn't know this money was going to be proposed to be reapportioned to crosswalks till just last night when I saw the slides. So,
Maybe what we could do is use that money for colored bike lanes to increase their visibility and the safety of cyclists instead of using it for the painted not sidewalks, but I guess the crosswalks.
Madam
You know, I
Mayor,
think in the spirit of the funding and in the spirit of the grant from Metro, I think we should have it more directly related to bicycle safety, if you will, or bike lanes or something of that nature.
Madam Mayor,
I don't know if anyone agrees with
Would
that.
anyone like to chime in on that? My colleagues, Councilmember Brotman.
you're on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, they're both kind of equally important to me. There's, bike lanes, and making them visible, maybe with painting and pedestrian safety and the visibility of crosswalks and things. Either one for me is okay. I'd rather spend it like we are talking about now on kind of infrastructure as opposed to an event, because event comes and goes. I mean, those events are really good, and I hope we can have them in the future, but they come and go, and this stuff stays for a while anyway until we have to fix it back up. So I'm kind of indifferent. If we want to use it for bikes, I would support that too.
Madam Mayor, member City Council, if
Yes.
that's the direction, and if there are no other input, we can certainly shift those items around, use the one-time Ciclavia funding, available funding for the bike lane installation on North Brand Boulevard, and then shift a request for that funding to be used against the cost of crosswalks.
That sounds fair enough to me. Anyone else want to, Councilmember Najarian, how do you feel about that?
I just think in the spirit of the funding, whether we do the accounting gymnastics or not, I just think that, with a straight face, I could say we used our Ciclavia money for bike improvements.
Okay, well, okay, without any objections then from my colleagues, and I hear no objections, so I think we should go ahead and do that, Mr. Galanian. Go on, Michelle.
Okay, can I just to clarify, if I might? So we're not changing the total amount that we're going to be spending on these items. We're just kind of using different buckets. Is that right?
Madam Mayor, members of council, that's what it sounds like. I'm just looking over at Mr. Lanzafame and Mr. Galanian because I'm not sure if they.
I'm sorry, I
they're-
was talking to
No,
Mr.
that's okay.
Lanzafame. What
They
was the
have-
question?
If we're able to do this, to shift the monies around between the two programs.
The Ciclavia money is eligible for the installation of bike lanes and bike lane improvements. However, it needs to be expended by the end of December of this calendar year. So Public Works will have to make sure that they are able to design and implement that bike lane on North Brand Boulevard by the end of the year, essentially.
I think Councilmember Brotman's question was about the amount. Is the amount similar? I don't have that visual at this point. Is the amount about the same?
Almost, give or take $40,000. I think it's manageable.
Okay, that's
yeah.
pretty close. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, Ms. Flynn. go
Okay.
ahead.
We'll get the slides back up. So okay, moving on to the next item, graffiti removal and remediation. On slide 7, this is utilizing a private contractor with current staff to help manage that contract. Cost on this would be $60,000. Slide 8, the climate action plan. This cost of $320,000 would be used to hire a consultant. The slide shows 7 different tasks that the project may include, and they're, different things as far as greenhouse gas inventory and analysis, greenhouse gas inventory projections and reduction targets, et cetera. Slide 9 is the East-West
I
Historic.
have a question. Is that a fair amount for the climate action plan?
Madam Mayor, members, City
Sounds
Council.
kind of high, but maybe I'm off on that.
Madam Mayor, members, City Council, Councilmember Najarian, based on the research that our sustainability officer had done in the cost of preparing plan in other agencies, this is actually in the middle range. It could go up as high as 450,000. That's what we found out based on the research.
And is this a one-year project?
It's more than likely going to take longer than 1 year, Councilmember Najarian.
Okay, I don't want that budget to grow. I mean, it seems like a healthy amount to do a very fine job that we've tasked. And I
again,
definitely don't want it coming in-house. I do see it's a consultant, but
right. And that's a not to
the
exceed
amount
amount.
What is it, not to exceed amount?
That's the cap, we're asking for a not to
There's a
exceed
cap.
amount. We'll work with the selected consultant to make sure that stays within budget.
Can I make a quick comment?
Councilmember Najarian, are you finished for now?
Yeah.
Okay.
done.
Councilmember Brown.
Well, I was just going to follow up on that. I think a lot of the cost, I observed Pasadena go through their process, and a lot of the cost is the community outreach and community meetings, and it's not so much just designing the plan. I think that's my understanding. So we'll have to manage that, but that's why it might look high, because generally these involve a lot of community engagement.
Thank you. Okay, I think as long as we have a cap on that, and when you negotiate, you can make sure that it doesn't go any higher. Thank you. Okay, next. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay. So the last follow-up item is the East-West Historic Survey on slide 9. This will be also outsourced to a consultant to provide, and it is something that can be done right away, or rather quickly into the fiscal year. So that pretty much wraps up all the items council had requested to come back with. So we've incorporated all of those that you've seen this morning, as well as what you saw during the second study session. So I'll recap all of the proposed Measure S appropriations for fiscal year 21-22 on the next few slides. The first section on this slide shows all the different housing programs and projects that we have proposing to appropriate. The affordable housing development at 920 East Broadway for $3 million, new affordable housing land acquisition for $6 million, the continuation of the monthly housing rental subsidy program for $2 million, the continuation of the rental rights program for $470,000, and the new tenant and landlord services program for $450,000. So in total, the housing total is $11.9 million. Under infrastructure, we have the bicycle transportation plan update for $125,000, pavement condition improvement project for $4.5 million, the pedestrian and bike lane striping and configuration maintenance for $50,000, the pedestrian and bike lane implementation plan that you saw this morning for $1.3 million. And we'll be using the Ciclovia money for the bike lane portion, but then the street art project will be part of this funding as well. So it's the same dollars, it's just in a different place. And the capital improvements to mitigate the heat island effect is at $800,000. So infrastructure total, $6,775,000. On slide 11, these are all the parks and recreation programs. We have the continuation of the year-round aquatics program for $636,000, annual community events for $83,000, the Glorietta Park concession building renovation for $75,000, Fremont Park, $2 million, electric operated equipment and infrastructure project for $550,000, the maintenance at Rock Haven for $25,000, and $1 million set aside for park land acquisition. Total Park and Rec total is $4,369,000. Under other quality of life items, we have the mental health resources for $200,000, the vehicles for the police department for community engagement and accountability for $300,000, the life safety firefighting apparatus and equipment, $1.5 million, crossing guard program, that's a contract for $511,000, Central Library children's and teen room renovation for $2.5 million. The street art project is $100,000. Again, we will be utilizing the funding a little differently from the other side, like we mentioned. In total, the dollars are the same. Graffiti removal and remediation is $60,000. Climate action plan, $320,000, and the East-West Historic Survey for $200,000. So other quality of life subtotal, $5,691,000. In total, the proposed fiscal year 21-22 Measure S appropriations are $28,755,000.
Michelle, may I ask, where do we have the fireworks that should be in the quality of life items? Is that something that should be on this budget?
Madam Mayor, member City Council, we need to expand that funding out of the current fiscal year since we need to secure the vendor this in the next couple of weeks.
Correct. The item, Madam Mayor, yes, the item you just approved on Tuesday night is coming out of current year Measure S funding, and that'll be incorporated into the numbers I'm going to show you on the next slide into the fund balance.
Oh, great. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
Thank you, Ruben.
So a recap of our projected ending balances in Measure S. I'll just kind of go to the middle of the slide there. Projected ending balance for this current fiscal year is $32.8 million. We do have a lot of project carryovers for the year that are going into next year. That's that $24.3 million carrying over. So we're looking to start next fiscal year on July 1st with $8.5 million in Measure S fund balance. This does, like I mentioned, include the recent appropriation for the fireworks. So that's already incorporated into this number. Looking at next year, our projected revenues for fiscal year 21-22 are $24,781,000. Proposed appropriations, as we just reviewed, are $28,755,000. That leaves a projected ending balance at next year, if everything is spent and received, at $4,535,000. I will pause here to allow council if you have any other questions on Measure S before we move on. If you need to change anything,
Well,
we can help answer those.
so I don't have any questions regarding things as they've been presented. I know that we're nearing the end of this process. What I would like to ask, and I don't know if my colleagues would agree to this, is that we're appropriating funds, and I know that during the course of the year when we bring reports back on the progress, we'll see how the money is being spent. But I do want to also revisit some of these department budgets throughout the year to see where we are with progress. And one of the things that we've spoken about is putting forward council goals, what our objectives are as a city, what we're trying to accomplish in order to be able to see and understand whether the money that we're spending, the allocation for consultants, whether it's for climate resiliency and environmental projects, are we meeting our intended goals? So then when we come back here or this time next year and we're having these discussions, we can see whether the money we spent met its objectives or not. This was more detailed than it was last year, but it was still a 50,000-foot kind of presentation of what is happening in the city. It's perhaps the type of presentation that's necessary at this time, but as council, I want us to go deeper into this to truly understand, because we get asked questions by the public and we want to have answers. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, member City Council, In response to Councilmember Kasakian's question or comment, that's a great point. I have indicated this before. My goal is that to have established our strategic goals based on council's priorities. Once we go through the budget review season, that's going to be our major task between my office and the city council. And once we have those goals and priorities set in place, we will be able to align departmental projects and programs more closely with those strategic goals. And at the same time, we will be revamping our key performance indicators for the next year or so. And with that in our arsenal and in our toolbox, we'll be able to, like it was mentioned, take a deep dive into individual departments' budgets and to ensure that we are aligned with council's objectives and progress, again, like was mentioned, towards those goals.
And if I may, thank you, Mr. Galani, and if I may, we have talked about, Mr. Galani and I have talked about having a council, a kind of a retreat so that we can set our goals and our strategic plan for the city as well. So we're looking to do that in the future when when we're really clear of this COVID situation, and so we can have a clear idea of what all of us, the five of us, have as our goals for the city. Thank you. Mr. Brotman, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was holding my questions and comments to the end, so I have a few here. First of all, on the pedestrian and bike plan implementation, that 1.3 million, those are those projects that have been identified fixed, or is that still subject to discussion over the course of the year?
Good morning, Mayor Devine, members of City Council, Councilmember Brotman. We have gone through a preliminary analysis of the pedestrian plan and have identified some of the enhancements that can be done, kind of the low-hanging fruits in terms of the intersection improvements, and identified those for various intersections that had been identified in this plan. And those are the ones that we're targeting as part of implementing in the next fiscal year. There are some additional ones that, for example, would require some additional traffic study before we can move forward. But the ones that we're identifying for the funding are the ones that we can implement. These include.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say these include mainly stripings, intersection for crosswalks, for using paint to do bulb outs, and then put delineators, those types of things that we can do and get them done right away. And then we are also looking at the more structural, as in structural improvements that would include physically narrowing the street in terms of the bulb outs and those types of things. Those are the ones that would require some additional studies.
Okay, and just to be sure, so we're not spending it on sharrows or putting in traffic lights in pedestrian areas, are we? I just want to make sure that that's the case.
Councilmember Brotman, no, these are directly come from the recommendations in the pedestrian plan, and are
in the pedestrian
for enhancing the intersections, basically, in terms of. Like I said, mostly the putting zebra crosswalks and the using paints to narrow the intersections, and using delineators as pilot to see if these concepts of the bulb out would work, and then moving forward with the continuation and doing the physical construction of those at a later stage.
Okay, and on the bike side, it's not being used for sharrows?
The bike side, we've identified one project, and that project is a Class 2 bike lane.
Okay, good. So, okay, on the, if you could stay, Mr. Imrani, because my other questions, I think you can answer. So on the cool pavements, those locations, how do we select those locations? Are those just places where you've got a scheduled resurfacing?
Mayor Devine, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, these are areas that we've targeted for slurry seal. Cool pavements have to be done on a street that's in pretty good condition, pavement-wise. So we are, and these are close to some of our streets, or excuse me, some of our schools that are targeted for slurry seal. And they also, some of the, we've looked at the tree canopy in those areas, and the tree canopy is not as dense. So we think that these, we can get with the reflective pavement painting, basically, we can get the biggest bang for the buck for these locations.
Okay. And then my third question is on the street trees. I see that there's 500 indicated there for parkways. And is that 500 in addition to what we would normally be doing, or is that the total? And the reason I ask is that the report we just heard on Tuesday said that we need 750 annually just to get back to our 2010 canopy, and that's 750 over a 10-year period, which is a pretty low goal. And here we're just setting aside 500. So I'm hoping that's 500 additional to what we were originally planning, but could you clarify that?
Absolutely. So the 750 is an annual goal that we were setting, and these 500 are in addition to the 300 that we would do normally. So if this goes through, this would be for next fiscal year, 800 trees overall.
So that would be 800. Okay. And then when you come back with the report that we discussed on Tuesday, if we want to up that and get to that, get to some higher canopy, overall kind of city canopy goal, then I guess we'll have to come back and look for funding for that separately, right? But it's 800. This would give us 800 for the year.
For the next fiscal year. Yeah, that's correct.
For the next fiscal year. Okay. And then just on the going to the, I like that, that we're putting this money to do the graffiti. And I'm wondering if we should be trying to address this issue we're all hearing a lot about. And I know Councilmember Kasakian has brought up many times the trash that's kind of gets dropped off, and as people are moving out of apartment buildings, particularly in South Glendale, and just sits there and and I know you guys pick it up when you get a call, but could we set aside some money to do more proactive cleanup and or more education, signage or whatever, or education to property management, property managers for some of these apartments where we've got this situation going on and on. We get so many complaints, and it's such a quality of life issue when that junk is just on the street for days and days until somebody calls it in or puts it on the My Glendale app. So that would, I don't know if money is going to solve that problem or what, but I just wanted to propose that as another thing for us to maybe add.
Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Brotman, that is a valid point, and Public Works staff, Mr. Imrani and I have discussed this before, and he's going to come up with a plan to be able to address that issue. Two things at play. As you know, we are finalizing the negotiations for the commercial franchise hall program, and that will, those selected vendors within their associated zones will have to pick up the abandoned and bulky items as it'll be stipulated in the franchise agreement. And number two is we do have funds in our refuse fund that will cover the cost of enhanced education and proactive collection of these bulky items in areas outside those commercial zones.
You know, if I could jump in and just add a couple of, pardon me, Councilmember Brotman, but I appreciate you bringing this up. It is a major quality of life issue. We get calls, texts, photos sent to us, and I appreciate that. Every time I've reached out to Mr. Emrani and Mr. Golanian, the issue has been resolved right away. But ultimately, you know, it's an issue that we need to talk about behavioral change with. I experience this problem in my house all the time with bulky items as my kid leaves his toys, Legos, whatever it may be, all over the place. And most of the time, just as you do for our residents and for our businesses, you pick it up just as I pick it up. But it comes a point where they have to learn to do it themselves and to be more responsible. And I'm talking about the individuals who either own the apartments or who are doing the dumping. When you do bring us back your proposals for ideas, I would like us to come up or to see at least one aspect of it that would look at perhaps fining, not perhaps, but fining those property owners who are aware of items being in front of their apartments, in front of their houses, and do not call the city for it to be immediately picked up, who are negligent. It is their responsibility. It is adding or taking away from the quality of life of the city. So I would like to see that as a option as well for us to consider. Perhaps not to adopt, but at least to look at what it would mean.
Yeah, and I would support that. And just my last point, and this is just a general comment. If you remember when we first looked at the Measure S budget, I pointed out that less than 1.5% was going to sustainability. So I added it up. We're now at 11%. So I just want to say thank you. I think we're moving in the right direction.
Madam Mayor, if I can.
And those are all my comments, Mayor Devine.
Madam Mayor, let me just, before we move on to the next section, I also want to ask about.
Councilmember Kasakian, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to ask about the paving or the cooling effect. I've brought this up. I know that there's a number of products out there that are being considered. I know City of Los Angeles was painting services with white paint. I'd like us to, again, consider looking at more sustainable, environmentally friendly products like the e-pave product that there was an experiment done with the city. And I think you touched upon it. I can't recall what the outcome of it was right now. But 80,000, I believe, square feet of Los Angeles, if not more, not square feet, but street area. I probably shouldn't have mentioned the number unless I knew what it was associated with, but ePave is being used in Los Angeles and it has been used to some success, and ePave has, from what the presentations I saw, lowers surface temperature between 5 to 30 degrees. It's something we ought to consider. It was a locally developed product here in the United States, I think either in Glendale or just outside of Glendale. And if it's something that we can utilize here, and also work with our schools and our college district to help them achieve or contribute to this cooling effect, that would be great as well. Some of the largest blacktop areas we have are on our school campuses. So I would like to encourage you to look into that as an alternative and to bring us information. As far as graffiti removal, I'd like to know, I appreciate that we're focusing on this because it is prevalent. It is everywhere. It's you can't drive on, it seems any city, any part of the city you drive in, you will see graffiti nowadays. How does the amount allocated in this appropriation or this ask compare to what we used to spend on graffiti removal?
Mr. Lanzafame will be able to respond to that question.
Mr. Kasakian, if I understand the question, maybe I can answer it this way to compare. If we were to add, say, a full-time, convert one of those positions of the two to a full-time, and then go with more hours on staff, about $43,000 in addition. But taking it third party, we're really limited in number of hours that we can assign. We get about 24 weeks of a similar, a third person, let's say, out there painting. And so we can spread it over, similar costs, spread it over a whole year, or we can really go after it for 6 months and then reevaluate.
And to add to Mr. Lanzafame's response, this is just an estimate. We haven't gotten bids, obviously, Councilmember Kasakian. And if we burn through it quickly, if it's necessary, we can always come back and request additional funding as we see the quantity and magnitude of graffiti out there.
So we had the graffiti removal detail before, a while back, did we not? Staff that was designated with graffiti removal?
The last several years, we've had 2 part-time staff members working between 25 and 29 hours a week.
Got it.
And they painted about 130,000 square feet. We had a non-work-related injury where one of those was out for a good majority of the time. And we cut it, it was about half, 59,000 square feet. So we have both of them back and looking to paint. And remember, we paint the public property, and then those in the private property will work with that property owner to have them remove it or contract with us to remove it.
Okay. So if we have roughly the same amount of people, and now we're attempting to contract out third party, just the amount of graffiti has increased. I'm not a law enforcement expert, but I see the taggings and some of the known groups around the city that have left their marks on various buildings and places. It would be best, I think, to look at how we can ramp up, how we can increase that in light of a broken window type approach, because the longer it lingers, the more it perpetuates. And I believe that we need to increase whatever it is that we're spending. If it means we burn through it, or for 6 months you do a very focused and earnest attempt to remove it, and then see what that leaves us with, how much more we still have to address, then let's do it. I mean, we are seeing graffiti now, Mayor and my colleagues, in the heart of downtown. We're seeing it on buildings on Brand, which in my life, in my 36 years in this city, it was unseen and unheard of. And I think that, it may seem like something trivial to some, but I think it does contribute to our image and our overall quality of life and how people feel and whether they feel safe in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on.
Okay. So the other item for follow-up this morning involved GWP and their public benefit programs. I can get this going. There we go. So on slide 15, just a quick recap for council. The public benefit programs are a 2-year plan and budgets. They'll be covering fiscal year 21-22 and the following fiscal year 22-23. GWP will be presenting the detailed plan and the budgets to the GWP Commission at their meeting on June 1st. And then from that meeting, any commission recommendations or comments that come out of that, GWP will then present to City Council on June 8th during the budget hearing and adoption. And as a reminder to Council, the appropriation for the PBC programs are part of the Special Revenue Fund under GWP. The allocation and the appropriation is done in total, not by particular program. So there is administrative flexibility for the department to utilize the funding across their programs if one needs additional funding. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, of course.
Ms.
Mayor?
Brotman?
Yeah, on the public benefit program, so is that the total budget will be determined after discussion with the commission, or the specific programming within a budget that we're going to, that we're finalizing today?
Madam Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, the proposed budget that we are providing to council today includes the proposed PBC programs. Unless the commission recommends to council to add additional funding to that number, then that would happen then at June 8th. We would make that adjustment for the hearing and adoption. At this point, that proposed budget is going to be reviewed by the commission in detail with the various programs that GWP has outlined.
Okay, so we could increase that budget if there's other items that we think are worthy. And I'm not just asking this theoretically. I mean, I do think there's some things that we should be looking at. And you know, it's premature to kind of say specifically whether they're going to be, whether they're going to work and all that. But I would like to make sure that we're setting aside something as a placeholder anyway for these programs. I'm thinking specifically of building retrofits for fuel switching from gas to electric. I think that's an area that we should be exploring. It could potentially not only reduce carbon emissions and other air pollutants, but it could also potentially reduce cost for building owners over the long term. So it has both a cost saving and potentially equity benefit, as well as a climate and air quality benefit. And it's not something we've looked at. And it could be something that we might want to put a significant amount of money towards if we all agree, collectively, that these are going to be effective and worthy programs. So I want to make sure that we can come back and say, we want to put $1 million towards this or something like that. And there's also community solar, which Mr. Zern had always spoken about, and we had money set aside, and that's just kind of disappeared. And I would definitely like the commission to discuss whether community solar should be brought back, because I think, that always made sense. We always heard it was coming, and apparently nothing really was done with it. And now it's just gone.
Councilmember Brotman, members of council, your points are well taken. And I think there was a question in there somewhere in the very beginning to speak to that more specifically. If there are any new programs that are proposed by either the commission or by the city council, there's two ways we would approach that. It would either be to move around some of the funding that is being approved as part of the proposed budget over the next 2 years within the PBC funds, or it would be to maintain all the programs that we're proposing that we know already there's a need for, and dip into the fund balance in the PBC fund that would remain after this. I believe we would have somewhere in the area of about a $7 million fund balance in PBC after we pay for or budget for all the proposed programs that we're currently doing, and the 3 that we're proposing as new ones.
Thank you, John. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so that concludes our follow-up items this morning. So looking at our summary for the proposed citywide budget for next year, fiscal year 21-22. This is a high-level view for council. These are all the various fund types. Well, not this slide. You'll see all the various fund types. In the general fund, we have our the number that we talk about all the time. The proposed fiscal year 21-22 budget is $247,054,677. It's an 8.2, almost 8.3% increase. Those increases, as you heard throughout the departmental presentations, primarily driven from PERS costs, benefit costs, as well as some salary costs. We did have a little bit of increase on the maintenance and operations side in funding our various operations in the internal service funds, such as building maintenance, fleet, as well as information services. Under Measure S in the general fund portion, this does not include the capital projects piece. Of that 28 million, we have 8.3 million that will be proposed for 21-22. And in total, the general fund appropriations are 255,384,000. Under the special revenue category, these are primarily all of our grant funds, driven mainly by the revenues that come in and how the appropriations are then planned for. So we have proposed fiscal year 21-22 in all our special revenue funds, total of $121,154,000. So again, that increase of about 6.5 million, primarily driven from the revenues that come into the grant funds and the planned spending as well as projects. Our debt service fund is the one fund that we maintain to pay down the debt on the building of the police building. It remains basically almost unchanged. This is just the debt service payment, if you will, for the bonds. Moving to slide 18, we have the breakout of our capital improvement funds under the general government category. So our capital improvement program is $16,471,000 proposed for next year, a decrease of almost 1.5 million, again, driven by mainly projects and what is planned for. And then under the Measure S capital improvement side, this is the remaining allocation that you've just reviewed, a little over $20 million here. So in total, capital improvements are proposed to be $36,896,000. Under the enterprise operations, this is where the GWP funds lie, refuse fund, sewer fund, Verdugo Communications are all under this category of enterprise operations. The total there, $434,818,000, an increase of a little over 36 million, mainly driven from their planned projects that they are going to be doing this next year. Internal service funds, these are all the information service funds, building maintenance, fleet, as well as all of our health and other medical type benefit coverages that we have, all under the category of internal service funds. That dollar amount proposed for next fiscal year is $121,308,000. The increase that you see there is driven from increase in medical costs, increase in funding for fleet, as well as building maintenance to be able to do some of the projects and things that they need to do, as well as information services. So in total, our proposed budget citywide for fiscal year 21-22, all funds combined, is $972,560,489. Broken out on a bar chart, you can see the categories across the various fund types, the largest being under the enterprise operations, and then next highest would be our general fund. These do include the Measure S amounts. Our fund balance recap is, our net use of fund balance recap is on slide 20. Revenues proposed or projected are $231 million. We do have our last and final payment for the loan for the successor agency, $1.4 million that is expected to come in. A little bit of use of economic development assigned fund balance of $536,000. And then this is where we have put the use of ARPA funds for next year to help balance the budget, a little over $14 million. So our total resources, total appropriations will balance out with for this next fiscal year.
Ms. Flynn, do you want to expand on the use of the ARPA fund being just an estimate, and we don't have the full guidelines yet?
Yes, Mr. Galani, I can certainly do that at this point if you'd like. So we do have the interim guidance from the Treasury on the use of ARPA funds and the eligible costs, as well as a little bit more detailed explanation on the calculation of lost revenue. Although they've provided the detailed calculation for everyone to utilize for lost revenue. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. So the interim guidance is in place for 60 days. They are taking comment on that. My staff and I have been on multiple webinars since the interim guidance came out about 10 days ago. And there's still some open questions on the types of revenue that need to be included in the calculation of the growth factor in your projections when you have a new revenue source come online. For us, that would be the local sales tax measure S, and that is a very common question across the state of California, as well as across the nation, because in some other states and cities outside of California, local jurisdictions can set their own property tax rate, so that can fluctuate from year to year, so that does impact their growth rate as well. So we're trying to get some more guidance and definition on those calculations so we can have a better estimate of how to project those. But we're also, at the same time, putting together a compilation of our expenditures that are pretty clear as far as what we could use to offset expenditures that the city has incurred due to COVID, whether they were spent through Measure S or the general fund or any other funds. And that listing at this point for the general fund amounts to about $7.4 million. That includes COVID leave time. It includes the Measure S assistance programs and a few other items. That list is not all encompassing just yet. So we are working on putting all of that together for council. We'll be able to provide council an update as soon as we have better definition, and if anything changes, we'll be bringing a report back to council with that.
Michelle, I have a
Yes.
question. Are we expecting any more federal funding from the Biden administration? I thought that we were a county and was to receive more funding in the future than this for what did you say, 14 million?
Madam Mayor, members of council, so the ARPA funds that I'm referring to for Glendale, the final allocation is a little over $43 million. That expenditure or that funding needs to be programmed through no later than December of 2024. The county, the state are all receiving various buckets of money, not just these types of assistance monies, but there's a lot of other monies that are allocated to counties and states for a variety of uses through the funding of the ARPA plan. So yes, they will be receiving other things. They do have other programs that individuals as well as businesses can apply for, as well as larger businesses too. For Glendale, I don't know if there's anything else coming. We do have FEMA expenses that are eligible, most likely, that can be reimbursed through FEMA. And the ARPA did allow for 100% reimbursement versus what is traditionally reimbursed at 75%. So that is all being tracked. Once we can do that application with FEMA, we will be ready to go with that. There is a little bit of a delay with FEMA funds just by the nature of how that program is run.
So we'll have eventually a little bit more of a cushion with this budget in the future.
Madam Mayor, members of council.
If we want to allot more money to other projects, we'll have that could be available.
Madam Mayor, members of council, at this point, until we know the definitions and the full guidance and all the calculations that we have to do, because we will be subject to audit on all federal monies, we need to pretty much line those up, make sure we know where things can be charged basically and what eligible costs as well as revenue we can offset, then we'll be able to have a better picture of what you're asking, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. So our recap for the fund balance for the general fund will be on slide 21. We are expecting to, right in the middle of the chart there, we are expecting to end this fiscal year, June 30th of 2021, with $79,417,000 in fund balance, which equates to 33.3% of our adopted appropriations for this current fiscal year. And then since we are projecting to basically balance out for next year, our ending fund balance for next fiscal year is the same amount. However, the percentage does change because our appropriation goes up. So our denominator in that equation changes a little bit. We are projecting to end the year at 32.1% next year of our fund balance, which is, if you recall, well within the current policy that council has established for general fund balance, the floor being 25% with a target of 35%. So we're definitely still a lot closer to our target. And then finally, as you saw in our first study session, our 5-year forecast, this remains unchanged. This does not include any Measure S sales tax revenue or appropriations. So it's strictly the remainder of the general fund. All our resources utilizing the ARPA funds this year as well as, or this coming year, as well as the following year in fiscal year 22-23 at this point. And then you'll see the change to fund balance at the bottom there. And as far as our authorized position counts by fiscal year, this chart gives you an idea of where our full-time authorized positions, when we say authorized, we mean what is in the budget. So any filled as well as vacant positions that are currently budgeted, that's the red bar. Going back to 2009-10, you can see we were closer to 1,900, and since about 2012, 2013, we have been right around 1,600 and a little bit under. And these last 3 fiscal years, we have held steady citywide at authorized full-time count of 1,584. Authorized hourly full-time equivalents are in the blue bar. Those fluctuate yearly for various reasons. In some years, we have new programs that come online or expansion of programs. For example, the sports program, the after-school sports program from Parks, the ambulance operators, when they came online, those are hourly staff. In fire, we also had the expansion of the summer hours at the swimming pool. So those hourly staff do fluctuate from year to year.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, I just want to underscore the fact, like Ms. Flynn mentioned, the fact that we have not grown our organization as far as labor and staffing is concerned, and despite the fact that none of our myriad of services that we provide have been impacted, and as it's been mentioned before, staff continues to do more with less, and they've done a tremendous job and have helped me and the city manager's office and finance department to maintain the staffing level and as well as the services that we provide.
Okay. And last but not least, this is a recap. As you saw in our first study session back on April 27th, we presented to council our proposed fee changes to our citywide fee schedule. We have on the schedule 2,342 fees, and the changes that are being proposed will have $134,000 estimated revenue impact. Of those little over 2,300 fees, we have 1,673 fees that have no changes for fiscal year 21-22. We're deleting 7 fees out of the schedule. We adjusted for CPI factor of 0.87%, 659 fees, and we are recommending implementing three new fees for this next year. And as a reminder to council, those 3 fees, one is for police personnel, and it's an hourly cost of $147 per hour. It's a blended rate for police personnel to help monitor filming activity or filming detail sites to ensure safety. The next fee was a $50 per key deposit fee at the Glendale Transportation bike locker area where people can store their bicycles and other equipment. And then under planning, we have the Glendale Transportation Demand Model Run Services. These are as-needed transportation demand model runs for proposed developments in the city. And that that fee is $4,160 per model run, and it's based on a specific number of hours for a couple of different staff that would be assigned to do that project. And Madam Mayor, members of council, that concludes our last study session for the budget this year. Happy to take any additional questions that you may have.
Do any of my colleagues have a final? Councilmember Najarian?
Madam Mayor, thank you. So thank you to staff for going through the budget in such detail. And I hope you don't mind that we also joined you in getting into that detail in many respects. One thing we haven't talked about that we're all keenly aware of is the PERS pension obligation that we have. We talked about this last year, and we decided that we'd put a commission together. And I think right now we're trying to constitute that and populate that commission. But we really do have to keep talking about this. This is a burden that is increasing every year, and it's far outstripping any increases we can gain from sales tax increases or property tax increases. And I mean, if you want to talk about sustainability, this is our sustainability crisis. I hope that the Blue Ribbon panel can dig into this. They're not going to come up with a magic bullet, though. I presume they're going to let us know if it's possible to get out of PERS. And we know it is possible, but it's going to come at a very high cost. Other years past, we've contributed to our, the 512 pension trust?
Section 115.
115, pension trust. We did not do that this year, correct?
Correct.
Because we don't have any money to do it. Our necks were saved by the ARPA money. Otherwise, we'd really be digging into our reserve. I don't know where else that money would come from, or severely slashing programs. I feel this was a feel-good session for us. We were presented with additional funds, and we had Measure S to dip into, but we've got some very, very rough seas ahead, and we have to take a very, very serious look with the Blue Ribbon panel's advice, or even without their advice, as to how we're going to get through this. It's not, did we have that forecast? Other budget sessions, we've had that 5, 10, 15-year forecast where things just turned dreadful on year 15. I mean, our PERS obligation is through the roof. We need to start talking about how we're going to get through that, whether it means getting more contractual work instead of expanding FTEs, or we're doing more hourly. And I'm not saying those are solutions, but those are possible options. We shouldn't really be feeling good right now. We've dodged the big bullet, but there's more bullets coming that are bigger and stronger and more impactful than what we were facing this year. So I hope we all think about that and try and work this through. We can't kick it down the road anymore. We've got to start making, as our efforts in the heat island and the trees and the other sustainability issues make small but steady incremental advances in solving the climate issues, we've got to make incremental advances in solving our pension issues, because we can't count on Sacramento. That's not going to happen. We've been hoping, we've had our fingers crossed for 15 years now. That's not going to happen. We have to ourselves and with a consortium of other cities decide how we're going to solve this existential crisis. I don't use that word too often, but this is an existential crisis for the city of Glendale as well as other municipalities. So that's what keeps me up at night. Not how many hours we're going to have of pool, and how many solar panels we're putting up. No offense, but this is going to kill the city if we don't take some drastic steps and start moving towards that goal. I'm upset we couldn't put any money into that 112 trust. That has provided great dividends for us, has provided a cushion, returning 5-6% on our investments where they're usually earning 1 to 2% in the open market. This was a great study session series that we had on the budget, but we've got this huge gorilla in the room that we didn't address, that we're maybe hoping our blue ribbon panel, we're sending our Sir Lancelots out to slay the dragon, and they're not going to slay the dragon. We've got to start doing our own work and finding a solution to this. So I feel better now.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Well, and go ahead, Mr. Galanian, did you want to, I had one comment to make. I just read this morning that CalPERS is thinking of raising the pension obligations of city employees. So that is, I hate to throw fuel on this fire. But this came to that maybe another solution that we should be thinking about is taking some of our reserve funds, like $1 million out of our reserve fund, and put it into this 115, because it's sitting in the reserve fund earning no interest practically. And if we throw it into this other fund, the 115, we may get more interest on that. If that's something that we may have to spend on pensions in the obligations in the future. I'm just throwing that out.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Galanian?
Well, before Mr. Galanian answers, I just want to chime in and say that I agree with Councilmember Najarian that this is the existential threat to the city. When you look at that budget and you see those figures in parentheses, meaning what we're going to be short in the coming years, it should be a cause for alarm, but it also has been a cause for alarm for a number of years, prior to at least myself changing my seat from clerk to sitting up here on the dais. And I will be looking to our veteran council members like Councilmember Najarian with his experience and knowledge to help lead us and give options as to how we will make it through this crisis. Obviously, it's not something new, and it's been persistent, and sure, we're addressing it now. And I think it's a little harsh to put all of the responsibility on the Blue Ribbon Commission. I think the Blue Ribbon Commission, part of its purpose is to help bring the public and our experts in the public into a discussion where oftentimes we're tasked with being the policy experts on an issue, and it's difficult to be. Just 2 evenings ago, we were sitting here trying to understand horticulture and becoming arborists, hobbyist arborists, if you will. And every week it's something different that we have to specialize in and understand and delve into and try to make the best decision for the community. But this is the most important decision, because without addressing this, we can't do any of the other things that we wish to do. So I hope that we can come up with some creative ways. I hope that there's some policy ideas that we can pursue. But if nothing else comes out of it and our community has a better understanding that regardless of how we got here, we're all here in it together now, that also will be important. And as far as the announcement from CalPERS, Mayor, I saw that as well, and it feels nowadays there are only a few things that are certain: death, taxes, and CalPERS demanding more money for the cost share from employees and raising rates. So we're at this bridge. We have to figure out how to cross it now, and hopefully in the coming years we're going to make some headway.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to let you
Thank
know
you.
I do have a caller on the
Yes.
line.
Okay, let's hear from the caller. Herbert Milano?
Mr. Milano, you're live. You have 3 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mayor Devine, members of the City Council, it is with a sense of relief that I hear you all talking about this significant problem with the pensions. As I am talking to you, I'm looking outside of my balcony here, about 4 blocks away from City Hall, looking at a street that hasn't been repaired in over 30 years. And nearby, California Street, which probably hasn't been repaired in 40 years. And there's an alley behind me that is about 50 to 60 years that hasn't been reconstructed. And when I look at the data of the city on the statistical reports, and I tell you how many streets have been reconstructed in the past few years, 0. Year after year, 0. If you were to take your grandchildren to City Hall and decide that you're going to walk to a city park, you're going to find yourself in a significant problem in trying to find one, let alone one where you can actually enjoy life. And if you notice from the last years when we needed open space and parkland, there hasn't been any. In the central part of Glendale, for the past 30, 40 years, 0. And when I look at the number of households in Glendale, which is about 76,000, and look at the police costs, we went from $400 per family per year to $1,400 per family per year. And that's not counting overtime, that's not counting the pensions, that's not counting the other benefits, the post-employment, and the list goes on. There is a direct relationship between our lack of infrastructure maintenance, our lack of parkland, our deteriorating quality of life, and the significant increases in costs with regard to pay, and more than anything, the exorbitant pensions that we're now paying. You know, we don't mind that police get paid well for the work they do, but this is being paid when they are retired, when they're no longer servicing the city. And these are humongous $200,000, $150,000 in pensions. It's astonishing. We are not that wealthy that we can afford that kind of pension and have the deficits of no road reconstruction, no funding for pipelines, water mains, parkland. And these are the things that I wish we could drill down into and revisit this in light of the situation, the financial constraints that we have. But I'm really thankful that you all took the time to address the significant problems we have with the pension. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Mayor, there are no more
Milano.
callers.
No more. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to say that I always appreciate Mr. Milano's comments because he often makes some very good suggestions. But I do want to mention that we have included infrastructure in our budget. We have included funding for parks in our budget and quite a bit of money. And and as far as the quality of life in Glendale deteriorating, I'm not so sure I agree with that, but we're all we can all voice our own opinions. I want to thank staff for these sessions. They have been informative. They have been at times shocking. Sometimes, as Councilmember Najarian said, kind of a good place to be. With that, I think we can conclude our sessions and prepare for bringing this budget to council. Mr. Galanian?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, Member City Council. Before I make my concluding remarks, I just wanted to address the comments that were made earlier before the caller regarding PERS liability. Believe me, and you're not alone, Councilmember Najarian, Our unfunded liability and our PERS obligation is on top of the list of things that keep me up at night. It's not something that I or staff has ignored or kicked down the road, kicked the bucket down the road, the can down the road, but we have been putting, thanks to the policy set aside by council, we have been putting money into the 115 trust, and it's actually been doing fairly well compared to what we earn putting the money in the bank. I'd just like to make a couple of points regarding the efforts that we have done over the years towards reducing that liability. As you know, our employees' contribution, their share of the contribution, excuse me, to PERS liability is higher than many cities in the region, if not in the state. And we have been at the forefront of, thanks to our association's agreement, forefront of increasing that contribution over the years. As far as feel-good, yes, this wasn't intended to be a feel-good budget study sessions. Again, as you know, we were faced with the unprecedented economic impacts of the pandemic that we weren't counting on. This wasn't a normal budgeting year, and as such, we haven't been able to put monies aside that we had done in the past using the end of the year savings. But a suggestion that was made by the mayor is very valid. As you know, at 32.1%, we have a very healthy reserve. Even if we compare it to the cities of Burbank and Pasadena, we're way, way above what they have set aside. And I also have to mention, and this is not what I'm advocating, the cities of Burbank and Pasadena had passed additional sales tax measures that they are using directly to pay down their PERS liability. And that's been council's direction to staff that we cannot be using Measure S funding for that purpose, and we have obliged. However, there are options out there, and we're hoping, working with the Blue Ribbon Committee, hopefully we can come up with some creative ideas to reduce that liability. Hiring part-time staff is not the solution, and I think Councilmember Najarian mentioned that too, because once you exceed that 1,000 hours, I believe, limit a year, then we have to enroll them into PERS anyway. We are looking, and we will be looking at other ways of potentially reducing that liability, but it's not lost on me. It hasn't been forgotten, and we will definitely take steps in that endeavor. With that, I wanted to express my appreciation to the mayor and council to have provided very valuable input and feedback during the last 7 sessions, and also to our staff, starting with the budget team, Director of Finance, and to be honest, all the staff who have been involved over the last more than 3 months in putting this budget together. Again, as you know, we had a major loss of revenue, not just unique to us, but all the cities. And we thankfully were able to close that gap with ARPA funds. But moving forward, we will definitely look into how to balance, structurally balance our budget. Thank you very much. Our next session or meeting will be on June 8th, where we will have the public hearing and adoption on that date.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. And with that being said, Mr. Jimian, what's next?
Adjournment.
I have a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
All second.
And we are adjourned at 10:32 a.m. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.